Welcome to the Untold Tales audio anthology, written by Philip Cahill and narrated by Dr. Jeffrey A. Robinson. Meltdown, August 2150. George waited whilst the journalist set up her recording kit. He didn't want to talk about the meltdown, but the Jensen woman couldn't be put off any longer. Things were not starting well. The taxi she came in had sped up his driveway and squealed to a halt, scattering gravel onto the flower beds. Now he had to wait as she painstakingly configured the audio-visual capture zone and droned on about the 64 virtual microphones and the 7 high-definition cameras. "Can't you use a notepad?" he asked. She shook her head. "I can lend you a pencil," he added. She flashed a patronizing smile at him and placed an oblong control box in the center of the large desk that separated them. "I'm ready now," she said, signaling the countdown before the recording would start. "Wonderful," said George. "I'm here with George Lee, one of the survivors of the Alpha Pavanis disaster of September 2100. Can you tell us of your recollection of that day on the 15th? Alpha Pavanis was one of the largest corporations in those days. They were into everything: e-commerce, tech manufacturing, and off-world mining. Heck, they probably were the biggest outfit in the solar system back then." "Yes, but the 15th of September. Let me get to it, Flo. Mind if I call you Flo? I was with Dave, Annabelle, and Mike. We teleported into the accounting metaverse to start an audit assignment. 15 September 2100. The avatars of George and the team were sitting in the metaverse base camp when the entire data continent went down. Suddenly, they were in total darkness. There was no sound and no pressure waves from the processing equipment. "It's okay," he said. "We'll just teleport out." The lighting came on after a few seconds. Each member of the team initiated a teleport sequence, but nothing happened. It was clear that it would not be possible to teleport out of the verse. Then the transmission flows restarted. There was a rush of sound, and the edges of the base camp were buffeted by the haptic output of the flows. They could see the data streams moving between system icons. George started a diagnostic of the status of the team's avatars. "Can't we get out of here?" asked Annabelle. "Flight capability is out too," said George. "What do we do?" asked Mike. "We've got to walk to an escape portal," said George. August 2150. "I don't get it," said Florence. "Why couldn't they just wake you up?" George's face betrayed his opinion of the question, but he managed to answer without sarcasm. "This was a first-generation corporate metaverse. Our physical bodies were in individual pods in lucid dream states. In those days, you couldn't wake up the physical body because it would risk the loss of the consciousness that had been transferred into the avatars." "Well, why couldn't they shut down the processing?" "Money," said George. "These systems would never be allowed to stop. There was too much money at stake. After a glitch, priority was always given to restarting the transaction streams. This was an AI-managed system, heavily dependent on haptics. Data arriving at a specific address would give haptic feedback, allowing the control layer to feel that everything was working properly. In other words, the Force feedback was a major part of the control environment. That's what it made it dangerous for us. How so? Because the forces were phenomenal. If an avatar was hit by a force-propelled data, it would disintegrate, killing the operator. Because the consciousness would be lost? Exactly. 15 September 2100. It was clear that the avatars were still functioning, as was the verse. Whatever had happened had blocked the team's ability to interact with verse elements. They knew they had to be careful about how they moved. In addition to the danger from the forces in the transaction flows, the avatars themselves could damage data. This could cause transaction processing delays or propagate errors which would cost trillions of dollars. Sorry, everybody. It was Duke Stalker in Mission Control. We're okay for the moment, Duke, said George, but we need to start moving. Copy that. I'm going to configure a low transaction channel for a portion of the space around the base camp. This will allow you to move to a dry channel. I'll set one up about 10 minutes walk west of your position. The processing environment consisted of a network of channels. A dry channel was a place without transaction flows. Dave asked, "How far are we from an escape portal?" "The one at your location is down. The closest one is north of you." "How far?" "Okay, let's keep calm and start moving," said George. "How far?" asked Dave. "About a day's walk," Duke said. George ignored the complaints from the team and told them to get moving. He knew that Duke couldn't keep the transaction volume down for long. Once on the transit route, they could move toward the functioning portal on the northern end of the verse. This was near where the high aggregation data stream surged upwards through the primary statements plateau, the financial reporting area. Autumn 2150. "So you guys got out of the base camp okay?" asked Florence. "Yeah, we got through the low transaction section pretty quickly. There would have been a bit of damage to the flows, but nothing too serious. On the dry channel, we were a couple hours into the walk when I saw Mike stumble and fall. He was ahead of us. We were in a section of the channel that passed close to the non-current assets section of the general ledger. The icons were vast structures towering hundreds of meters above us. Apart from depreciation flows, transactions didn't hit these icons very often. But when they did, they were dense, high-volume flows representing asset purchases and disposals. The force levels here were very high. Mike had been knocked over by a shock wave caused by a massive transaction hitting one of the icons. The wall of the transit corridor had ruptured. "But you were in a safe area," said Florence. Duke had set up the route very quickly. He didn't have a choice. We were told to retrace our steps to move back from this section of the verse and get on the ground. "And leave Mike?" "Yes. Duke insisted that the processing would soon stop in this section." "And you believed him?" "He was right. Transactions the size of the one that had damaged our corridor were rare. Things happened pretty quickly after that. Annabelle remained calm, but Dave had started to lose it. He started running. He ran past Mike. He told me that despite the rupture to the wall, the rest of the passage seemed to be intact. I told Annabelle to go check on Mike and started running after Dave. The asset account icons looked to be calm for the moment. If I caught up with Dave quickly enough, he could be brought back to safety. I was wrong about the integrity of the channel structure. Dave slowed to a walk ahead of me and came to a stop. The roof started cracking, and the walls folded just ahead of him. He ran toward me, and we both sped back along the track. When we got to Mike, Annabelle was still trying to revive him. The three of us then tried to drag his avatar back along the pathway. We'd almost cleared the part of the channel running beside the asset section when another massive transaction hit one of the accounts. The floor of our channel started to disintegrate, and we tried, as fast as we could, to pull Mike's avatar to safety. We managed to get to firmer ground, but the floor opened under Mike, and his avatar was wrenched out of our hands. We started to slide toward the hole. There was a wide crack low on the channel wall. This gave us each a handhold. We managed to hold on as Mike's avatar disappeared into a hole in the floor. He fell out of the general ledger layer and dropped downwards, crashing through the prime entry layer and hitting the raw data layer. He was now so far below us, we couldn't see exactly where his body had landed. We scrambled back onto the undamaged section of the channel and crawled away from the hole. "What happened next?" asked Florence. The three of us lay on our backs, trying to process what had happened to us. I reported to Duke and told him what had occurred. He didn't say very much. 15 September, 2100. Annabelle nudged George and pointed upwards. "Look at that," she said. "There's an air sled on that platform they sometimes use. That could be our way out." At the very top of the verse, way above the primary statements layer, was a viewing platform where the company invited some of the major shareholders and analysts to watch financial statements as they moved in real time. This was also where the company presented its results to the stakeholders and the financial community. The financial statements were produced in real time, but the habit of presenting quarterly, half-yearly, and annual results persisted. The biggest event of the year was the presentation of the annual results on the first working day after January 1st. This was when a air sled was used to fly groups of people over the upper layer of the metaverse. It was a detailed presentation of results, and often the sled would swoop low over selected parts of the primary statements. This was accomplished by running commentary, giving key performance statistics, and forecasts for future growth. Dave had followed the conversation. "Okay, but how do we get up there?" he asked. Then Annabelle said, "We climb one of the transaction flows, one of the big solid ones that move up the financial statements layer. Then we get mission control to launch the shed and pick us up." She was talking about the aggregated asset flows, the ones that moved from the ledger accounts up to the primary statements. These were crafted as raft-like structures because they were discrete accounting adjustments and not dynamic cash flows. The non-current assets section of the balance sheet was one of the highest points on the primary statements layer. The problem would be getting out of the dry channel and getting up to one of the flow structures at the right moment. The hole in the floor that had swallowed up Mike was a damaged section caused by the excessive force generated by an asset purchase transaction that had also damaged a section of the dry channel. They would have to sprint across a section of wet channel. George called up Duke and put the plan to him. He argued at first, no, too risky. When Annabelle shouted at him, asking if he had an alternative, he reluctantly agreed. He said, I'll give you a 5-minute window of zero cash flow transactions close to the asset icons. It took Duke 15 minutes to set things up. George calculated that if they ran fast enough, they could reach the base of the asset icons in 4 minutes. Duke could then bring the following asset flow structure down to their level so they could hitch a ride. Autumn 2150. The screen on Florence's control box flashed a warning icon. She leaned forward and tapped it. The screen went blank, so she slapped her palm on the desk. George giggled, pulling a charging pad out of one of the desk drawers and pushed it toward her. I've still got a paper and pen if you need it, he said. No, that won't be necessary. Go on, said Florence. She dropped the box onto the charging pad, tapped angrily on the screen, and the device came back to life. Go on, she said. On the goal signal, we jumped out of the dry channel and ran for it. Just past the halfway mark, Dave stumbled and crashed into Annabelle, bringing them both down. This made me stop and run back to help. Dave didn't want to move. He sat where he fell, shocked out of his mind with fear. Annabelle tried to help pick Dave up, but I slapped her hand out of the way and shouted, telling her to continue running if she ever wanted to see her kids again. Once I pulled Dave to his feet and started to run with him, he regained his balance and moved ahead of me. Up ahead, Annabelle had reached the icon base area. In the layers beneath us, a wave of raw data surged toward the primary entry modules. This made me run faster, ignoring everything around me and focusing on keeping moving. The last 60 seconds or so of that run were the longest of my life. I skidded to a halt just behind Dave, dove to the ground, and turned onto my back to look upwards. A flow structure had just left the top of the asset icon 50 meters from our position. It began to descend slowly toward us. Duke came online and said, back away from that thing when it lands. I'm going to have to reconfigure it so you can climb onto it. The structure was an oblong block about the size of a railway wagon. There was no way we could climb up the smooth sides and get to its roof. We saw a small niche open on the side facing us. It was about 4 feet from ground level. We managed to climb into the niche just as the thing took off. We could see that a small crowd had gathered on the viewing platform as the flow structure came in to land on the asset tower icon on the balance sheet. We had a spectacular view over the data continent, but we still couldn't see the southern end of the metaverse. It was too far away. The sled rose slowly from the viewing platform and moved toward us. It was a beautiful sight. You'd got out and survived, Florence said. What made you go straight back in? Well, there were about 25,000 people spread all over the continent that day, and I had to do something to stop more people being killed. What did you do? I went back in. Just like that? With a malfunctioning avatar? No. I got flight and teleport capability reestablished first. How? I just did it. Come on, how'd you do it? Asked Florence. Duke reasoned that the malfunction was caused by the ancient legacy systems used in the verse. We worked out that we could use a top-layer operating environment to give me a full avatar capability. The problem was we couldn't use this top-layer environment to get other people out. Why not? Asked Flo. God, you ask a lot of questions. Because it would only work on a small scale, a specific link to a specific avatar. It was like I could be lowered into the verse on an umbilical cord. We couldn't hook up 25,000 other avatars. So you went back in? Asked Florence, her face betraying her skepticism. On your own? Yeah. And you saved everybody? Well, nearly everybody. There were still a few that didn't make it. Nearly everybody. How did you do that? It's pretty technical. I've already given extensive testimony to the committee of inquiry. You've read the report? I have. Well, the detail's in there. Long time ago. Forgotten most of it. Florence leaned forward and tapped the screen of her box. I have the report here, she said. It said you modified the transaction system to allow people to escape. Yeah, you see, Duke had modified flows so we could escape. It was just a question of drilling in escape portals from the outside layers down where people were trapped and slowing down the flows so the portals could be used. Let me be clear on this, said Flo. An escape portal allows avatars to safely teleport out of a dangerous section. Am I right? Correct. You see, I've spoken to a lot of survivors, and they told me they don't remember exactly how they got out. I even got a few witnesses who swear they didn't teleport out. Well, everyone was confused. It was a disaster area. The meltdown happened about the same time as the evacuation. The whole system shut down. Trillions of dollars were lost. The corporation never recovered. Yeah, collateral damage. But you know, most of the people in there that day went home to their families. Do you want to know what I think happened? Nope. I think the AI was persuaded to crash the system. It killed off a multi-trillion-dollar corporation. I just don't know how it did it, how it shut down the data continent. Flo, look, stop this. It's just not possible to shut down an entire data continent. The AI's primary function was to keep the system running at any cost. You teleported into the control nexus and spoke to the command AI, didn't you? Speculation. That's not what happened. That's the only way it could have been done, George. You asked the AI to kill the system. I've spoken to an SEC insider. He said that's what you did. Don't try to deny it. When she'd gone, he settled into his office chair and swiveled it around so that he was facing the garden. He was pleased with the way the interview had gone. She'd swallowed the story that the inquiry board had believed 50 years ago. In those days, the safety of the operators was given a low priority. So it was convenient for everybody to believe that an AI had been persuaded to shut everything down. The truth was much simpler. George had simply hooked up a random number generator to all the primary entry nodes. There had been exponential growth in the transaction input, and the forces generated had effectively killed the system, allowing people inside to get out. Let her speculate, he thought. She's never going to know the truth. Thank you for listening. As you know by now, we love our listeners, fans, patrons, and supporters. Please let us know what you think of our podcast and our stories. The best way to do that is to subscribe to our podcast at untold-tales.com. By doing so, you'll be added to our mailing list so you can be notified of upcoming episodes, blogs, and other information. Thanks again for listening, and have a great day.